Hello and welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson. This week, a 16th century pamphlet from the real world that describes what we must presume is the corpse of a giant squid washed up on the western coast of Ireland, and how it was interpreted by the people there. Stats will eventually follow once I get through the backlog of other creatures I'm meant to have statted up. A true and perfect account of the miraculous sea monster or wonderful fish, lately taken in Ireland, bigger than an ox, yet without legs, bones, fins, or scales, with 2 heads and 10 horns of 10 or 11 foot long, on 8 of which horns there grew knobs about the bigness of a cloak button, in shape like crowns or coronets, to the number of 100 on each horn, which were all open and had rows of teeth within them, and in all other parts wonderful and unparalleled, together with the manner how it first appeared, and was taken at the place called Dingle Eichef, in the west of Ireland, and since brought to Dublin to be shown publicly, and all other material circumstances relating thereunto, faithfully communicated by an eyewitness. Whereas several rumours and various reports have been spread abroad in discourse concerning the strange fish taken in Ireland, we, having a very perfect and faithful account and description thereof, sent us some time since in a letter from a credible person that was an eyewitness of that monstrous sight, have thought fit for unveiling report from the disguises of fiction, and preventing the obtrusion of, reader's note, there is damage to this word, imperfect relations on the too oft abused world, to present the same plainly and truly in public view, as a thing real and deservedly admirable. On the 3rd of October last past, at a place called Dingle Eichef, in the county of, reader's note, damage to this word, the west of Ireland, one James Stewart, riding by the seaside as the tide was coming in, perceived at a distance something of a strange bigness to make towards the shore. At first he apprehended it might be some horse that might have been caught away with the violence of the tide, and having recovered himself was now swimming to land, but approaching nearer on a closer view, he was infinitely surprised and amazed, not so much at the bigness, which yet he found to exceed that of a horse, which he first took it for in the body, as at the uncouth shape and number of strange horns of great length, which rendered it not a little terrible to behold, insomuch that he durst not go nearer to it, lest it should destroy both him and his horse. Wherefore, riding off, he went immediately to one Thompson that dwelt hard by on the beach, and acquainting him with the strange adventure, desired his aid, and that he would bring ropes and handspikes with him, and what other help he could procure, but there being none at that time at home, but himself and his wife, they could not get any other assistance. However, they too went down with him to the place, where the man and his wife were both almost astonished at the sight of this strange monster, and the woman especially so far frightened that she would by no means permit her husband should go near or meddle with it. Yet Stewart, the first discoverer, boldly adventured to ride up pretty near it, and at last to touch it with a rope, and found it made no resistance, but lay stranded on the ground, and wanted water to carry it off. Upon this, Thompson and his wife, seeing it so peaceable and inoffensive, grew courageous, and came near to assist the other man, and by their joint labour they got ropes so about it, as they tumbled it over, and were able to hale it further on shore. During all which time it made no resistance, but when they went to lay hold on the horns, they found thereon shells, like coronets with teeth within them, which got hold of their hands and fingers, so that they were glad to let them go. And the night coming on, they were forced for that time to leave it, having dragged it quite upon dry land. Early next morning they return with more company, whom the noise of this rare accident soon drew together. But at their coming they find the monster quite dead, and now had time to view, and not without wonder, consider its wonderful and prodigious shape, which they found as follows. The length of this sea wonder, horns and all, was full 19 foot, and in bulk or bigness of body somewhat larger than a horse. It had 2 heads, the largest of which joining immediately to the body, had no perfect distinct shape, but like a vast lump, wherein nothing plainly appeared but two eyes, of an oval form, and of extraordinary bigness. This great head carried the horns 10 in number, of which the two longest were situated in the middle, and were smooth, unlike the other 8, viz. 4 on each side, were all wreathed or crooked, and upon them grew curious shells, as it were, of the bigness of a large clock button, but in form and shape like crowns or coronets, 2 and 2 together, and over against each other, to the number of 100 in all on each horn. On top of every one of these buttons or coronets was the resemblance of a pearl, which was to open and shut as a little mouth, and had within it a row of teeth, so that it should seem, beside the mouth of the little head, which we shall describe by and by, this monster received nourishment for its body at 800 several places, for to that number, or thereabouts, did the crowns on all the 8 horns amount. Besides, it had a natural power to contract or draw in these horns into its head, as a snail does, and extend them again at pleasure. But when it was dead, they all stood out at their full length, some of them being 8 or 10 foot long, and the 2 longest, which were of equal size, and length 11 foot. Between these 2 smooth longest horns, and in the middle of all the rest, grew up from the great head the little or smaller head, at about 3 or 4 foot distance. This was a shape much like the head of a hawk, looking upward, and had a strange mouth and 2 tongues in it, and here too, no doubt, did it take in much of its nourishment. The body itself, besides the horns, was about 8 or 9 foot long. It was altogether smooth, without scales, fins, or legs, and all over of a flesh colour, and only a large fleshy skin like a mantle, which was fast to the back, but hung down loose on both sides with a fringe round at bottom, and this was of bright red on the outside, and perfect white within. This mantle was generally supposed to be its chief support in swimming, for it had not one bone in or about, nor any tail, but towards the lower end it grew sharp like a wedge. In brief, everything in the said monster was wonderful. The liver being taken out is credibly reported to have weighed 30 pounds. For experiment, the people boiled some of the flesh, but the longer it boiled, the harder it became. It gave a very good scent as it boiled, and seemed fat, but in boiling, the fat hardened, and no creature, though several at divers times were tried, would eat a bit of it, or so much as taste of it. A true draught of this rare animal, together with one of its heads and 2 of its horns, was carried to Dublin on the 16th of December last, and presented to several persons of honour, since which time there is leave granted by authority for the public showing thereof, both in Dublin and other places. We might now devote the reader a little, and tell him that some zealots, hearing of a strange creature with several heads, 10 horns, and more than triple crowns, took it for the apocalypse beast, and fancied the Pope was landed in person. But non bonum est ludere cum sancta. We dare not profane a text for a jest, nor play the fool with thunderbolts, and hope none will be so impertinently vain as to place every strange production of nature to be account of prodigies, since if we consider how large a share the sea makes of this inferior globe, and that nature is ever active and wonderfully fruitful, we may not irrationally conclude, or at least suspect, the ocean to be inhabited with many several species of creatures, as the earth, and that the vast wilderness of waters contains as many monsters, and altogether as strange ones, as any in the deserts of Africa. And now some story hooks. The creature is apparently not dead when first found, as it attempts to grapple the fingers of the people who are dragging it ashore. A magus with sufficient skill could create a pool that both imprisons and restores the creature. A healthy squid might be taken as a familiar. Magi can only create things that they can name, in the sense of making them a target for a spell. A character who does not know a squid exists cannot make a squid. The creature can be used as a template to create other creatures of the same type, and further, with the right rituals, it can be used to create versions of the squid with magical powers, like flight or breathing air, and so on. The parts of the creature's body may serve as forms for enchantment or as materials for alchemy. Similarly, the parts of the creature's body could provide the equivalent of the cloak of feathers or wolfskin pelt used to transform into an animal. The zealots see this as a demon, and this makes them easy to influence. What killed this creature, and why? 801 mouths. What does it naturally eat, and how, and why? The animals of the sea are mirrors of those on the land, according to medieval philosophy. What is the squid a mirror to? Averditus Magus wishes to create a submersible, and is interested in stories of the squid because he wishes to use biomimicry in his designs. Can you acquire another? Is the creature social? Where are the others? Do they, like some real-world octopuses, build communal lairs, which we might call cities? Do they use tools? Your saga may vary.